One of the things that I never imagined when I was growing up in Greensboro, North Carolina in the 1950s and 60s and even early 70s is I never imagined that the day would come when we would walk around with our phones, that we would take our phones with us everywhere, that when we're leaving our houses, after checking to see if we have our keys, we would check to see, oh my God, do I have my phone? Oh my God, is my phone charged? I just didn't see that coming. I never imagined that we were going here because when I was growing up, the telephone was like a part of your furniture. It was just in your house. In fact, there were some people who had telephones made in the style to match the style of the decor of their home. Later, we used to buy telephones that were colors that would blend in with the colors of our wall or colors of curtains or colors of our furniture. So it was like a piece of furniture. So I never imagined that we'd be walking around with our phones. Now, I do remember early on there was such thing as a party line. So the party line as opposed to the private line. The party line meant that your bill was going to be smaller because you were sharing your line with other people, hence the party line. And a lot of people in our community had this type of line because, like I said, it meant that your phone bill was going to be cheaper. So we had that for a while, I remember. And one of the things with the party line is that you could actually pick up the phone and you could hear people's conversations. Now, you weren't supposed to do that. That wasn't considered good phone etiquette. People didn't like you if you did that, but people did. And sometimes there were fights and arguments over people who were between people who were on party lines about people picking up the phone. But the thing was, even if someone in my house was not on the phone, but someone on one of the parties who was a party to our line was on the phone, then we couldn't make a call because they were on the phone. And there was sometimes people would get on the phone and they'd just stay a real long time and you'd be wanting to make a call. Now, I do remember sometimes my mother would cut in and say, I have an emergency call to make. You could do that, pick up the phone and say, hey, I really need the line right now. So I'm going to ask if I can use the line and you can come back. But I'm only going to be a little while. So I remember those types of things happening. So most of the time, people were very friendly because we all knew at some point there may come a time when we may need to make an emergency call, and they felt the same way. So people were pretty cordial about that. But the fact that when I think about it, the fact that you could actually pick up the phone and listen to somebody's call, not much different today, except no one has to pick up a phone. They just seem to know. Now, the long distance calls back then were extra. They were not part of the monthly package, meaning that if you made a long distance call, you were going to pay extra. A long distance call was a call that was out of your community, out of your county, out of your state, however they were doing it. So, for instance, if I wanted to make a call, I'm in North Carolina and I want to make a call to New York City, then that would be a big extra amount because they charged you according to how far you were calling. So one of the things that I remember, one of the ways to make sure that no one was ever going to invite you to their home again, or that no one sometimes never was going to speak to you again, and that was to go to someone's house and make a long distance call and not tell them or offer them money. Oh my goodness, I have seen families destroyed, relationships destroyed over the long distance call. That was like one of the most disrespectful things you could do, was to go to somebody's house, make a long distance call and not tell them. And then they would get their bill and there'd be this extra money on their bill. And usually they knew who to trace it back to because they knew who was in their home at a certain time that was usually not there. And also, let's say if you're visiting me from South Carolina, well, then all that has to happen is for my mother to look at the bill, look at the date, and know that you're from South Carolina. And so these calls that are going back to South Carolina around this time had to be your calls. And so that was a reason for someone to never allow you in their home again if you made a long distance call without their permission. Because there was a charge for a long distance calls, a lot of people, especially family members, were very aware and conscious about that. And so they didn't want you to run your bill up. They knew you didn't have any money. So, for instance, I would call a relative and say, "Hello, it's me, it's Ann. How are you doing?" And they would say, "Oh, Ann, you calling me? Where you calling me from?" I said, "I'm home." And they said, "Oh, you at home in North Carolina? Well, how you doing?" I say, "I'm fine." They'll say, "Well, I'm doing fine too. Look, I'm going to go because I don't want to run your bill up." And that would be the conversation. So sometimes people would just call literally to say, "Hey, it's me. I'm alive and well. How you doing?" "Oh, I'm doing good." "Okay, I'm going to go because I don't want to run your bill up." And that's how it would be. Even, I'm going to say, once the cell phones came on the scene, even, I had a relative that just never got it. Some of the elderly people never understood that when they were talking to you, that it was included. And so they would still get off the phone real quick with you because they didn't want you to have to pay money for talking to them. So they would say, "Hey, how you doing? You doing good? Oh, good to hear from you. Okay, I'm going to go now because I don't want to run your bill up." Before the cell phones actually came on the scene, there was something called a car phone. Car phone was something that the businessmen, executives, politicians had these phones, and they were really as big as a phone in your house. And they came in these boxes that were about 12 inches by 8 inches, something like that. And they would carry these cases to their car and somehow hook it up, and they'd be able to make calls from their car, which was an amazing thing at the time. But they were huge phones. And so I remember that my friend Janice and I, because the car phone receiver was the same size as a house receiver, we took our receivers from our house and we put them in our car, and we would ride around making believe we were talking on a car phone. Now, mind you, what is terrible about this memory is that we were already adult people with children, but we thought that would be fun to take a receiver from our house and drive around in the car like we had that going on like that. One of the things that I remember growing up is that, especially the girls were told this, that when you leave your house, no matter what is going on, you always need to bring a dime with you. If you have nothing else, if you have no money whatsoever, find a dime. You need to bring a dime. And later it was a quarter. And the reason for bringing that dime or that quarter was so that you could always use the payphone to make a call if ever there was a problem. So you needed that dime or you needed that quarter to make that call at a payphone. I remember when the cell phones were first coming in, I was determined I wasn't going to get one because there were so many public phones everywhere. So why would I need a phone? Why would I create an extra bill? What could I possibly want with a cell phone, to carry a phone around with me? And so I was starting to travel and do presentations around the country, and it was becoming more difficult to communicate with people because I watched almost like overnight the payphones and the phone booths just kind of disappeared. It seemed like one day they were there, and then the next day they were all gone. Because there used to be payphones in the hotel lobbies, phone booths. There were phone booths like on different corners. You could always find a phone booth somewhere. It was always a phone booth nearby. Any business had a phone booth or a payphone on the wall. So I always felt that that was the thing that if they were going to be there forever. And all I needed is to have the money that it took to put in the phone to make a call. Well, all of those things just disappeared. All the payphones, the phones on the wall, the phone booths, they weren't there anymore. And then suddenly it seemed like to make a call from a hotel room, oh, you might as well have rented another room. So I believe those are the things that kind of forced me to go into the phone to finally get a cell phone, was because there was no way to communicate when I was traveling. The other thing that I remember is that back in the day, we knew people's phone numbers. We knew them. You could ask someone for someone's phone number who was in your circle of friends, and someone would just rattle it off. And now today, I know I misplaced my phone one time and people were offering me their phone to use, and I'm saying, well, is not the phone. I don't know any numbers because when I'm ready to call somebody, I just find their name and touch on it. And I know we got to get better. I started carrying a list in my wallet of phone numbers of relatives and family members just to have that, because I don't have that like we used to. And back in the day, you just knew you just knew everybody's phone number. You could just rattle it off, and today we can't do that. So here's where we are today with our cell phones and all of our personal information and being tracked. And the good news, if you're lost in a snowstorm and your signal is still going, somebody might be able to find you. But there's a lot of positives and a lot of negatives to this whole cell phone thing. But these have been just some of my memories about the telephone and the cell phone. What are some of your memories about the telephone?